I was 19 when I did something so stupid, I still cringe thinking about it. Me and two buddies decided, for absolutely no good reason, to try walking out of a big box electronics store with a tablet stuffed under my jacket. I figured if I just acted casual, nobody would notice. I didn't even make it to the parking lot. A loss prevention guy grabbed my arm before I hit the doors, and within the hour I was in the back of a squad car, wrists zip-tied, staring out at the same lot I'd parked in like a normal person 2 hours earlier. It was a Saturday night, which mattered, because that meant no judge until Monday morning. At the station they ran me through booking, mugshot, fingerprints, the works. Then came the part that made it all feel real. They took my clothes and handed me an orange jumpsuit. I remember staring at myself in that thin polyester thing and feeling my stomach drop through the floor. When they walked me into the holding area, I knew immediately I didn't belong. Everyone else looked like they'd done this a dozen times. Tattoos, scars, loud voices, completely unbothered. A couple of guys clocked how young and scared I looked and started calling me pretty boy, just to mess with me. I stared at the floor and tried not to react. Eventually they let us make calls. I phoned my parents. My dad didn't yell, he just sounded disappointed, which somehow hurt worse. He told me a lawyer was already involved and I'd likely be out Monday after arraignment. Monday felt like a year away. That night, they assigned me a cellmate, a man in his 40s. Calm voice. Told me his name was Russell. For the first hour, Russell almost made me feel okay. He told me how meals worked, how to keep my head down, how not to look nervous in front of the wrong people. Then his questions started getting weird. He wanted to know where I lived, whether I had a girlfriend, whether my parents were home alone during the day, and by the end of the night, he was sitting close enough
that I couldn't pretend I didn't notice. End of part 1. And trust me, the version of this story where Russell stays in that cell, that's the good version. What actually happened next is the part that still keeps me up at night. Stick around for part 2. Russell's hand on my knee was the moment everything changed. I moved away fast. He just smiled like he'd been waiting to see exactly that reaction. From then on, I dreaded the second that cell door closed. The lights in that block never fully went dark, and every time I drifted off, I'd snap awake convinced he was watching me from the top bunk. One time I opened my eyes, and he actually was, just staring down, saying he couldn't sleep either. I didn't answer. 48 hours in there felt longer than any month of my life. When I finally stood in front of the judge, I barely processed a word he said. I just remember hearing, released, and feeling my knees go weak with relief. My dad picked me up. He wasn't angry anymore, just quiet. I didn't want to talk about any of it. Not the arrest, not Russell, none of it. I wanted a shower and my own bed, and to pretend the whole weekend never happened. 3 days later, I got a follow request on Instagram from a blank account. No name, no posts, a profile picture that looked like a dark, grainy room. My account was public, so I didn't think much of it. That night, the same account sent me a direct message. It was a selfie. Russell's face, way too close to the camera, with that same unsettling half smile from the cell. The caption underneath read, "Miss you already." I blocked him immediately and threw my phone across the bed. He knew my real name. He'd found my profile, and I had absolutely no idea how. End of part 2. If you think a blocked account means this story is over, You have no idea what was waiting outside my house 2 days later. Part 3 is where this stops being creepy and starts being genuinely dangerous. 2 days after that DM, I came home from work in the late afternoon. My parents were both still out. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a beat-up car parked across the street with someone sitting motionless behind the wheel, head down. I didn't like it. I went straight inside and locked the door behind me. A few minutes later, standing in the kitchen telling myself I was being paranoid, I heard the front doorknob turn. Slowly. Back and forth. Like someone testing whether it was locked. Then it stopped. 30 seconds later, the back doorknob did the exact same thing. That's when I called 911, whispering, because I was terrified whoever it was could hear me through the door. While I was on the phone with the dispatcher, the doorbell rang. She asked if I could see who it was. I told her I was too scared to even look, and that I thought it might be the man I'd shared a cell with that weekend. By the time officers arrived, the car was gone and whoever rang the bell had vanished. I told them everything: the arrest, Russell, the Instagram message, the car. The moment I mentioned I'd just gotten out of county lockup, I felt the entire tone of the conversation shift. One officer flat out asked if I was sure I wasn't just shaken up from the weekend. I wanted to scream. They gave me a case number and left. For a week, nothing happened. I started to believe it was over. Then I went to a dive bar with friends who had no idea about any of this. We were near the pool table when I glanced toward the back of the room and saw a man in a low baseball cap and dark jacket sitting alone. He lifted his head. It was Russell, and he smiled the second our eyes met. End of part 3. Running into your jail stalker in public should be the scariest part of this story. It's not even close. Part 4 is where I finally learned his name wasn't even real. I didn't wait to find out if Russell would follow us outside. I told my friends I needed an Uber and to just wait with me in the parking lot. The second I was in the car, I called my parents and told them everything I'd been hiding. The DM, the doorknobs, all of it. That night they drove me straight to the police station. This time, with my parents standing next to me and a screenshot of the Instagram message saved on my phone, the officers actually took it seriously. I gave a full statement about the break-in attempt, the fake account, and seeing him at the bar. Within days, I had a temporary restraining order. That's also when I learned Russell wasn't even his real name. I won't repeat what his actual name was. But I did learn something that still bothers me to this day: how easy it is to look up someone's booking information, charges, and even loose location data through public arrest records once they've been released. My best guess is that's exactly how he tracked me down. He simply looked me up the same way anyone could. The restraining orders seemed to work. I never saw him again after that night at the bar. But the experience changed something in me permanently. Getting arrested for shoplifting was humiliating enough on its own. The legal mess, the embarrassment, the lecture from my parents. But none of that compares to the real lesson. One dumb decision put me in a locked room with a stranger who should never have had access to me, and then handed him just enough information to follow me back into my actual life. That part still doesn't leave me. End of part 4. That's the first story, and it's a true reminder that the scariest part of jail isn't always the bars. Now we're switching locations entirely. Part 5 takes us into an abandoned prison that should never have had anyone inside it at 1 a.m. except us. This next one is hard for me to even type out. Whenever I think too hard about what almost happened to me and my friend Maya, I start to spiral. Last year I was dating a guy who lived about an hour from me. The relationship didn't last. But something from those drives stuck with me. A massive, decaying building we'd pass every time, about 15 minutes from his place. High arched roofs, tiny windows, a giant cross at the peak. It looked like something out of a horror movie. He had no idea what it was, and didn't care to find out. I did. After we broke up, I couldn't stop thinking about that building. I told Maya, and she got just as curious. Online searches gave us nothing concrete. So, against every ounce of good judgment, Maya suggested we just drive out and look at it ourselves. "It's abandoned," she said. "Nobody's going to be there." We went at 1 a.m. because in my mind, if there was any kind of security, surely they'd be gone after dark. I know. Terrible logic. Maya parked down the road so we wouldn't trip any cameras, and we walked the rest of the way. Up close, there was no sign, nothing identifying what the building had been. The front door wasn't even latched. Inside, it was obviously an old correctional facility. Cell blocks, rusted bars, debris everywhere from a collapsing ceiling. I wanted to turn back almost immediately. Maya wanted to keep exploring. We compromised. Just a few more minutes. That's when we heard a loud crash echo through the building. We froze. And when we turned to head back toward the exit, Maya spotted someone standing 20 feet away in the doorway, watching us. End of part 5. A stranger alone with you in a pitch-black abandoned prison is bad enough. What he tried to get us to do next is the reason I still won't go near old buildings at night. Final part is coming up. The man put his hands up and said his name was Mike, that he was the building's security guard and was supposed to detain trespassers. His story came out smooth, almost rehearsed. He said the building used to get broken into constantly, so he patrols it at night. Maya whispered to me that she didn't believe a word of it. Mike offered to walk us out with a warning, but led us deeper into the building instead of toward the entrance, claiming part of the ceiling near the front had caved in. His outfit didn't match the story either. Jeans, sneakers, a flannel. Not exactly security guard attire. He brushed it off, saying the job was too boring to dress up for. Eventually he led us to a long, narrow hallway ending in a door, and behind it, a pitch-black staircase going down. He stepped aside and said, "After you." Maya refused to move. When I asked him to lead the way instead, he hesitated, took 2 steps down, then turned around and grabbed my arm, saying he needed to make sure the door locked behind us first. Maya screamed and shoved him, breaking his grip on me, and yelled at me to run. We sprinted the entire way back through the cell block, out the front door, and didn't stop until we were locked in the car and speeding down the road, checking the mirrors the whole drive home. A week later, I worked up the nerve to report it to local police. When I described the security guard, the officer went quiet, because that building has no security, no guards, and no cameras. Whoever we met that night wasn't supposed to be there any more than we were. The officer told us, plainly, that we were lucky to be alive. I still don't know who he was, or why he was inside that building. Sometimes, I can still feel his hand on my arm. A few years back I moved across the country and started working as a corrections officer at a new facility. About a week in, I met an inmate, I'll call him Edgar, serving time for a parole violation, not violence. He was polite, called me "Sir," never caused trouble. Then one day, completely out of nowhere, Edgar asked how my brother Stan was doing. I'd never told anyone there about my brother. This jail was 1,000 miles from my hometown. I brushed it off as coincidence, until a few days later, when Edgar casually asked if my mother still lived by the lake. That got my full attention. Her name is Diana. She does live on a lake. And I had never once mentioned either fact to anyone at that job. I checked his file. Edgar had been born and raised in that area. He'd never lived anywhere near my hometown. There was no chain of information that should have connected us. I reported it to my supervisor, who waved it off as a manipulation tactic. I wasn't convinced, but I let it go. Edgar never brought up my family again before his release. On his way out, he just looked at me and said, "Maybe I'll see you around," with a smile that didn't sit right with me at all. Months later, settled into a new relationship, I started getting strange notifications from my home security camera while staying at my girlfriend's place. A man in a hoodie, face obscured by shadow, rang the bell at odd hours claiming to be selling me door to door. Harmless enough, until it happened again at 2 a.m. 2 nights later, and the man told me through the camera that I should open the door to see what he had for sale. I warned him I was law enforcement. He lifted his head just enough for me to see his face clearly. It was Edgar. He didn't run. He just smiled, turned, and walked off into the dark, on foot, with no truck, no vehicle, nothing matching his story. My brother confirmed he'd never heard of an Edgar in his life. Digging further, I found Edgar had no listed family, no prior address. He wasn't there. He'd simply vanished from the system. A month later, my girlfriend's doorbell rang at 10:30 p.m. Nobody was there when I answered, but down the street, a figure about Edgar's size was walking away into the dark, not responding when I called out. I never saw him again. I never found out how he knew my family's names, or how he kept finding out where I lived. To this day, I still check the cameras before I open the front door, and some nights, I still wonder if he's the one ringing the bell.